Yep, 2 more minutes.
The fifth rectangle
laying left and right. That fifth rectangle, just at the corners, just to the right.
Okay.
That's the last one.
Right over that. I did these.
Building blocks.
They should have went to the other direction.
Oh. Now these are all from the exact same picture.
Oh, wow.
Those are children.
Can you believe that?
Those are kids that did that.
What a rectangle is, huh?
I see that one in the center look like mine, Patricia.
See, this was the hard part for me to tell you how to do that. That was
So tell me,
it was hard.
what
Yeah,
did
you
we
did
learn
good. Yeah,
about
that was good.
communication? The sender. The sender has a lot of power, don't they?
Yeah.
For those of you who were senders, did you find out that you weren't nearly as specific as you thought you were?
Yes.
Yes. And a lot of times, that's what happens. And sometimes that's what happens to us. Because, let me look at the original for a second. You know the original? Yeah, I remember I was doing a session at a major company one time, and they said, oh my God, now I know what's going on. I'm saying this, but they're hearing this. It wasn't just that they didn't want to do what I said, because isn't that the way we feel? Anytime we deliver a message, we're like, how much clearer could I have been? I mean, I told them exactly what I wanted done. How in the world could they not understand that? But through this activity, it showed you a lot of times you're not nearly as specific as you think you are. Okay. What else did you learn?
Well, it's difficult to describe something like that without using your hands or pointing or...
Very difficult to do it without using those nonverbals, okay? Now, there have been a lot of studies that look at what percentage of a communication comes from the words that we speak versus how much of it comes from our nonverbals. They're called the Moravian studies. Those studies showed that only 7% of a message typically comes from the words. 93% of a message usually comes from the nonverbals. Now, what are we including in the nonverbals? Your expression. What else?
Body language.
Posture.
Body language, posture. What's another big one? Tone of voice. Okay? So if I say, you know what, yeah, I really want to come to a meeting Friday at 6 o'clock. Okay? The words said I want to be there, but the real message is in the tone. And it's so funny. You guys are chuckling. I said that in a class years ago, and I picked a guy, and I said to him, you know, when I say to him, what am I really saying? If I say, you know, I really want to come to your meeting Friday at 6, and then I said to the class, what am I really telling him? And they said, you want to date him. And I said, trust me, that was a miscommunication, okay? So tone of voice is huge. But in today's day and age, we're emailing, we're texting, and we're limited to that 7%. So that's why we're having all of these misunderstandings. Another point, how important were the questions in this activity? Very important. Can you imagine what these would have looked like if you couldn't have asked any questions?
They didn't ask.
Oh, you didn't ask?
I did. You could ask. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
The questions were absolutely critical. But my question is this, how often do we question in the workplace? Not a lot.
Enough.
You're much more likely, particularly if you don't have a strong relationship with that person, to just make an assumption and come up with something on your own. So if they say, hey, I want you to develop a business plan, you might not know exactly what they mean by that, but you'll come up with whatever you think is a business plan. And then you realize later that you weren't exactly on the same page. Okay? Then the last point is this. How many of you had senders who explained the overall context before they actually started describing the boxes? They said they're going to be 6 rectangles, they take up about 3/4 of the page, they're turned in different directions. How many of you had that?
I said that.
Okay, so
how many to start off with?
you did. What did that do for you? And actually, you asked. I overheard you. You said, wait a minute. How many are there? doing that, what does that give you? Yeah, a visual. And what was your point? Yeah, an overall picture. So this way, again, I said begin with the end in mind. You know where you're going.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've done this where people have drawn the first one so big that they didn't have space for the second one. So they had to tape pages together because they never knew that there were 6 of them. They thought there was just one. Okay? And again, bringing it back to the workplace, when people ask us to do something, do they always give us the overall context? Do they explain the big picture? A lot of times not. A lot of times they just say, hey, I want you to do this. And then after you do it, you give it to them, and then you find out what it's being used for, and you're like, oh, well, if I had known that, I would have done it in Excel, or I would have done it completely differently. So a lot of times if you're not getting that context, just like you did, ask for that context, because it certainly helps.